I think the purpose of this video is to make it simpler and more accessible and less scary to apply to Art Foundation, specifically Kingston's. Because when I was applying about a year and a half ago, there were a handful of videos about what to include in a portfolio and how to do it, but they tend to be quite short and general and they leave parts of the process out. And so I had to go and find out the information myself. And so I sort of found some useful information that maybe now would be useful to you. And so I went to Kingston's foundation. So this video can only be about that. But I also got into CSM and was going to interview for the Printers Trust, but decided not to because I was completely sure I wanted to go to Kingston. I managed to get my hands on some of my friends' portfolios and looked at them to try and figure if there's any commonalities between them and is there a Kingston thing that they're looking for. But what I actually found was how different they were. Like my friend Ollie, he had pictures of his self-done stick and folks, and then my other friend was growing bacterial flesh clothing. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing, but as long as it's kind of weird and niche, that'll definitely be a positive. And so the portfolio is the most important part of the application. Even though they will care a little bit about the personal statement and the reference and to your grades maybe, but they give unconditional offers to almost everybody. So it kind of seems like they don't really care about that. And so the key thing you want to do is you want to show how hardworking and interesting and interested you are through your portfolio. And so the best way to do this obviously is to have work which genuinely reflects your own interests and that's taking you time that you've come back to and reformatted and rethought about and reconsidered why you did certain things. So it's kind of a longer process that you're thinking about the idea behind the work with. Um, but there are other things you can do. You got to keep, well, you don't have to, but keeping a personal sketchbook or going life drawing, or especially for Kingston, because they ask 10 images of 10 images to show who you are specifically. You really should take the opportunity and make them very specific and very personal, um, because that's kind of what they're looking for at Kingston, I think. And I think it's also good practice to include at least one piece that you've really worked on, you've labored over it for a long time and you can see it in the piece. And I think that's good just to show that you do have the determination and the grit to stick to one thing and develop it. I think by way of example, my friend had this really good 10 images about donuts being everywhere, and even though it was quite simple, and not incredibly groundbreaking, it's still quite unique, and it shows that she's always looking at the world and noticing things out there, and this is one part of that. And so they're looking for interested and engaged students for sure. Maybe a little strange, but in an exciting way. And so I think another two key things they're looking for is interest that is personal, as opposed to doing things because you have to do it. If you do art A level, you kind of have to make art. But I think they want you to go out and seek things that are personally interesting. And then I think the other one is a really high level effort in whatever you are doing. So whatever you've decided to do, they want you to completely commit to that and be confident in it. And I say this because this is also this is what was expected of you on the course. So it makes sense to me that they're looking for people who would fit in well with their course. And I think another way of showing interest is definitely having a really wide variety of work, different techniques, different mediums, different ways of approaching subjects and different subjects approached. And it shows that you're willing to try lots of things, not really be too attached to any one thing, so staying flexible and and enjoying the process itself, because that's also something they're big on in the course. And I had in Meg's portfolio, she had both this animation and also this what looks to be a long exposure photograph just in the observational drawing section. And so even though you might not conventionally consider an animation or a long exposure photo to be an observational drawing, it does show that she's trying to gain a wider understanding of observational drawing itself, and she's pushing the envelope of what could be considered observational drawing by approaching it in very different ways. And finally, the portfolio it needs to be able to speak for itself and make sort of logical sense. So you have to know when something causes something else, or when something is in response to something, or something is a development of something. And it's also a good idea here to not use too many words, just because they probably won't read them, so there's not really much point. And this is the part where having somebody else to help you really comes in, because it's so hard to judge yourself whether something makes sense because you know that it all makes sense yourself. But this is a really hard bit. You should definitely run your portfolio past somebody else. And obviously, it's better if they have some connection to art and design, but also if they're just a fresh pair of eyes, like a family member, they'll be able to help you see where things maybe where you thought it makes sense and doesn't. And the portfolio, while making it, it should be relatively straightforward, relatively uncluttered. I mean, if it was conceptually relevant for a page to be messy, or like there's particularly energy you're trying to get across on a page, then you could break that rule. Like I mean, nothing I say is ever a hard rule. But overall, even if you do decide to break that rule, it should feel confident overall. And so the personal statement is definitely like another way of getting your personality across it is in the portfolio. And I think another really important bit of it is saying why exactly you want to go to Kingston. Because unlike UCAS, when you do personal statements and applications for foundations, they go directly to the foundation itself. So they would have expected you to have done your research about why Kingston and what is different to Kingston from the other foundations. So just make sure you've done that and make sure you put it somewhere in the personal statement. And so I've made like a lot of statements and sort of things. So I'll try and contextualize them in the context of what I submitted as my portfolio. And so like bear in mind, like I don't like well, some of the work is still good, but most of it feels kind of old to me now, and I've spent a year like doing art and design. But but I had a couple of goals when I started making this. Obviously, I didn't know everything I've said in this video when I started making it, but a few things I worked out while I was making it, and a few things maybe I did subconsciously. And so the first goal was to show like the variety of stuff I'd done, and the second was to show a lot of my design work, because I did this workshop with this guy from Store. They're really good, by the way. If you live in London, you should definitely do one of their courses as well. And they're all free, which is great. But he did like a free portfolio review, and so he told me, he was like, your artwork's okay, but your design work is really good. So I was like, okay, in that case I have to make sure that my design work is really obvious in the portfolio so that they can see the work that I invest at and hopefully let me in, which they did. So with these observational drawings, I was really showing like the variety, like how I enjoy experimenting. I used ink, I've used oil, I've used pencil and charcoal. But even when I used ink, I used it differently each time. So like I'm not fixed in any one way. And then I did have like more technical charcoal drawings that I didn't think I chose not to put in, because I was like, I think they'd be more interested at Kingston that they use charcoal in a weird and more personal way than in a study. And now I've spent a year there, I still think that. And then I made my design work, which I did in DT A level. I only did DT, not art. An entire third of the process images, more than any other project, so that it had like space to be understandable, but also because I thought it was good, and I was like, I'm happy to take up a third of it because it's like probably my best work. And then this was more artwork, but the way I approached it was a bit more like design, specifically this time designing an image, because of all the iteration in it. So this was like 4 out of the 15 pages, so I made this one a lot as well. And it also shows how observational drawing and design like are interrelated in my practice at the time, so that's why I liked it and I put it in. And then the final piece section, absolutely my weakest. I was just trying to put in things which weren't so bad. I mean, this this like 3D render, I look at it now, I'm like, why did I put that in? I should have just re-rendered it in a way that it doesn't look awful. But I think luckily this proves the point that the portfolio does not need to be like completely perfect, absolutely all the way through. I think as long as it shows potential, that's good enough for what they're looking for. Um, and then finally, I thought my 10 things about me were quite good. I specifically thought that the best images were the ones that showed me in places doing things, like going to a workshop, or going when I went to this lecture at the Barbican, or then I was using a laser cutter. And I think it's because it shows me like trying to increase my skills, shows like some curiosity, um, and I think that's quite important. And then the workshop, I already mentioned Store, so yeah, definitely check them out. And so I think overall it's definitely an imprecise science, and it's really hard to know whether you'll get in or not. But the best thing to do is like apply to a few, make sure you have a backup, apply with as much effort as you can, and then you just have to forget about it until you get a response. So if you have any questions, feel free to DM me or like comment them or send me an email, whatever. Thanks for watching.